What's going on, everyone? Ryan Patty from NJ.com here. I'm joined by my three fellow high school wrestling experts, and Bill Evans, Joe Zadalis, and Jacob Ferriet. And you're listening to episode number 2 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. If you listen to episode number 1, you would know that we discussed a lot of different topics, and that's going to be the same on this episode. And what you'd also know is we are anticipating a fun week of duels and tournaments. That's exactly what we got. I want to start with the HWS because that's where I was at on Saturday, and there's a lot to talk about from that tournament. It was historic for a few reasons. I think someone told me that it was the first time the finals had all 14 championship bouts come down to bonus. So all 14 were either a major, tech, or pin, and it's very rare. It also speaks to how good the top of Hunterdon, Warren, and Sussex are in terms of the individuals. You also had the third and fourth ever fourth timers get crowned at the tournament, and Carson Walsh from Pope John and Gavin Hawk from Phillipsburg. Those are two state runner-ups from last year. The first two to accomplish the feat were Jojo Aragon and Eddie Ventresca from Pope John, and Jojo's now an assistant at Pope John, so he got to see Carson match his record in person. And I spoke with Jojo after, and he was very, very happy for Carson to get that achievement. You also had Luke Galetta from Phillipsburg win his third title. Rhett Washleski from Hunterdon Central won his second. And then you had a bunch of first timers, and there were a couple that were very due. One being Jaden Perez from Del Val. He's knocked at the door a couple times. And then you had Ethan Dalling from Kittatinny as well, who had lost the previous 2 years. So, that was a big moment for him. And you might have seen Donnie Almeida not in the field for Pope John, and that's because he was sick. Head coach Mark Petrowski said it's nothing to worry about. It was just a stomach bug from last week. And the tournament also had good team-wide showings. You had Peterborough win their ninth ever tournament title. Sophomore 215-pounder Kevin Buonacore was their third champ to go with Hawk and Galetta. And, that was kind of a surprise because that weight was kind of up for grabs. You didn't really know who was going to win it. So Peterborough got, another one in the hat there with Kevin. And then you had their sophomore 113-pounder, Anthony Pettinelli, pulled off a huge upset, pinning Jake Holly of Pope John in the semifinals. So that was very surprising. Jake Holly's a state medalist from last year, so he was one of the better wrestlers in the field, and he got decked in the semifinals. So that was surprising. But there was also a duel that I wish I was at. I was very happy to be at Hunter Warren Sussex, but you had St. Joe's beat Bergen Catholic on Criteria D, which is bout wins. St. Joe's had 8, Bergen had 6, and it came down to the final bout at heavyweight. Christian Alvarez and Benji Shu wrestled again. We weren't sure if it was going to happen because St. Joe's forfeited to Shu at the Catholic duels, probably to protect seeding because Alvarez was healthy at that tournament. And, that's kind of how some coaches operate. Even this early in the year, they're thinking about AC. So you weren't sure if they were going to wrestle. But with how good these teams are, it seemed bound that they were going to meet again. Alvarez beat Shu at the B 7-1, beat him on Saturday 9-2, and it capped an amazing duel that just showed how good both those programs are right now, healthier than they were a couple weeks ago as well. Bill, what'd you see last week that kind of caught your attention?
Yeah, I was at the Cinnaminson duels, and we talked about Lower Cape May last week. Coming off the Williamstown duels where they were 3-0, went in the Cinnaminson duels undefeated. They were seeded third. Really stormed to the championship. They beat Paulsboro 50-25 with 6 pins and a forfeit. And then just wrestled a tremendous championship match. Gabe Tosto picked up a pin in a close match. Bryce Paley finished it off with a technical fall. Had a couple kids, throughout the day that they were able to just kind of insert into the lineup and pick up some big wins. So, they're a team that's rolling. This is going to run on Wednesday morning. We're taping Tuesday morning. So they're going to wrestle St. Augustine tonight, which will be a real test for them. So, we'll find out, I guess, how good they really are. But we know that so far they're off to a great start. And, after winning the South Jersey Group 2 title last year, Will is probably looks like the favorite again. Then that same tournament, Wall beat Paulsboro in the third place match. A little bit of an upset there. It got down into the lightweights, which is where Paulsboro is strong. Wall was able to pick off a couple of the, Paulsboro's stronger kids to pull it out in the end. And Paulsboro lost their last two, and then on Monday night, real shocker, they lost at home to Collinswood. Collinswood was missing a couple kids, and then still they were down 27-7 and ended up getting four pins and a forfeit in a 6 week weight stretch going up into the upper weights, and ended up beating Paulsboro for the first time since 2008. That was only Paulsboro's fifth loss in the Colonial Conference since 1971. They're on a three-match losing streak, which is the first that I can ever remember. Now 6-5. Just having a lot of trouble staying off their backs, which, if anybody knows anything about Paulsboro over the years, that they're usually very stingy with bonus points. That they get a 20-point lead on you, the match is pretty much over because they're not going to get pinned. You're going to have to beat them in seven straight matches, which is obviously almost impossible to do. So they're struggling. They got a big match against Audubon on this week, who's might be the next best team in South Jersey Group One, and we'll see if they can get themselves straightened out. I still think, give them a couple of weeks, they can at least win the section. Even some years that they've struggled, they've still been able to do that. But I guess on the top side, Lower Cape May is definitely kind of building it into a little bit of a South Jersey power at the very least, maybe even a little higher. And then Paulsboro, unusually struggling was something else that obviously stood out for me.
Jake, what are you taking a look at from last week? You were at Somerset.
Yeah, so there it was a great team title race. So Watchung Hills won the team title by 2.5 points over defending champs Ridge. And basically it came down to the 215 pound bout, which was out of Watchung Hills' control. But it was Trent Levash, Bridgewater Raritan against top-seeded Nate Engel from Ridge. And Watchung Hills needed a Bridgewater win of any kind, basically to prevent Ridge from getting those points that would have come with having a champ. And so there was no bigger Trent Levash fan, there was no bigger Bridgewater Raritan fan in the gym than Watchung Hills coach Jim Huff. And even though they're, big time rivals as programs, he said afterward, like, he was coaching him on the sideline, from the corner, just like he would one of his wrestlers. And so Lee Vash actually pinned Engdahl from Ridge, who was the top seed. And so that gave Watchung Hills an 180 to 177.5 edge in team points. And so that was Watchung Hills' first team title since 2020. They three-peated from 2018 to 2020, but they hadn't won since then. And it was Jim Huff's last year at the helm. He'll be the new AD at Parsippany Hills come the end of the state tournament in March. So it was nice for him to, go out on top, go out with the champ. Anthony D'Andrea, three-time champ for them now, first since Mike Magaldo, who's an assistant coach on staff. And, Cody Pritzloff was the other champ for them at 157. But what D'Andrea and Huff both told me at the end was, it's not about how many champions you have. It's about how many guys that you have that can outplace their seed. So whether it's in wrestlebacks, whether it's in the third, fourth place match, it's picking up kind of every point possible at every juncture you can. And that's what Watchung Hills did better than probably any team in the field. In addition to D'Andrea and Pritzloff winning titles, I think they had another 8 or 9 medalists. So, that right there shows that, of the 14 guys they entered, basically everybody got on the podium and was a big contributor to that team title. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing too, Immaculata, which is in its second year as a program, had 3 champs. All 3 of them are repeat champs. So you had Ryan Goldstein at 120, Mason Tedembell, and Nate Keller at 144, who beat Gavin Duran in what a lot of us thought was going to be the bout of the finals, and it turned out to be. They're all sophomores. And so, Rodney Van Ness, who was a longtime Somerville assistant, has built that program up. They finished 5th in the team race, but it's clear, they're knocking on the door, and they could very quickly become an emergent power there before too long. And then the other thing that, sort of caught my eye was Manville's trip Freitag. So, in a county and conference, whatever, with a lot of Group 3, Group 4, Group 5 schools, here's this kid from a Group 1 school in Manville, claimed his third county title, first wrestler in Manville program history to ever win 3 Somerset County titles. And, he wants to go to either Naval Academy or West Point to throw javelin and discus, but he's still very much a wrestler. And sorry, Manville coach Pat Gorbatuk told me afterward, he said, listen, his 40-year plan is more important than his 4-year plan. And he also told me that, he wants his guys and his team to not just be good for Group One, but good in general. And I thought that that was something that really stood out. He said, it doesn't matter that we might be one of the smallest schools in the tournament. We have guys that we know when we throw out there on the mat can compete with anybody. And so I think that that was particularly impressive. And then, I mentioned Trent Levash for Bridgewater Raritan. He was one of 3 champs for Bridgewater as well, along with Matt DiEduardo and Logan Levine. And Levine was actually a champ in 2022 at 106, made the finals last year, but didn't win, and then got back on top of the podium this year, winning at 138 pounds. So, I think it was a nice mix of storylines all throughout, some of the usual suspects with a nice mix of newcomers. So, all told, I mean, listen, the fact that the team race came down to 2.5 points, I don't think you'll see a county tournament all season be that close. So,
Joe, let's hear about that short conference showdown from last week.
Well, obviously, the biggest happening in the short conference last week was St. John Vianney's 33-27 win over Southern in an impeccably well-wrestled match. Technique was at a high level, and I mean, it was almost like being at a college match. It was very tactical. Wrestlers left very few openings, very few angles. Anthony Knox got to close it out. He pinned with a pin to give him the margin of victory. But what was interesting about that match was that Southern wrestled without its state placer from last year, Bryce Minera, at 132. And, the way the match turned out with the flip and the matchups, Minera probably would have went 138. And at least in the eyes of the Southern fan base and coaching staff, Minera would have got them bonus there. So, take 6 away from Vianney and give 6 to Southern. It's a different result. That was a great match. We'll talk about this a little later, but the beat goes on. Southern and CBA are this week, and down the road is Southern and CBA, which has been a tremendous match the last couple of years. The other 2 teams that really have caught my eye is Middletown North. They moved into our top 20. They had a victory over Howell last week, which I don't think has happened in more than 2 decades. So Middletown North is making a name for itself. And then Brick Memorial had a nice win over Cranford on Saturday. And, Mike Kiley just gets it done year after year after year. Now, Brick Memorial's not going to beat CBA or Vianney or Southern, but everybody else is pretty much capable of Memorial's capable of beating. So, the other thing that's interesting is Brick Memorial had its wrestlers from 106 to 126 down last week. They had them down a weight class. And, I was trying to figure out maybe why he was doing that. I don't know if it was to try and win the Cranford match, but the more I think about it, it's so he can win the match he has tomorrow night against Rumson. With those wrestlers down, they match up well with Rumson in the lower weights, and then they have the 3 big boys at the top. And it will be interesting. Trey Talmadge is down to 75. 3-time state champ Harvey Ludington could go 215, and then, Ben Zubas at heavyweight. So, keep an eye on Brick Memorial. They might spring an upset tomorrow night. It sure looks like tactically they have an opportunity, Ryan.
Awesome, Joe. And guys, I mean, we're a month away from being in the bleachers at Rutgers for the state finals. Teams are making statements, trying to build up that team tournament resume. And, if they haven't wrestled their county tournament yet, they're also getting ready for that. So we're seeing a lot of teams kind of emerge. I want to talk about the NJIC predominantly here, but one team catching my attention is Montville out of the NJAC, and the Mustangs are 9-0. They won 5 duels last week, and they're making noise again this year. They made the North 1 Group 3 final last year as an 8 seed before they lost to Wayne Valley, and this is a team that returns a lot from last year, and I think you have to peg them at the very least as a contender again in their section. So kudos to Brian Capral on the job he's doing there. He's doing a great job. But the NJIC is becoming fascinating. I touched on Hasbrook Heights beating Emerson Park Ridge last week by a large margin. Well, the week before that on a large margin, and New Milford against Pompton Lakes last week in a battle of unbeatens. New Milford was 5-0. Pompton Lakes was 7-0 coming into it, and New Milford won the last three bouts with pins to win that duel 39-37. And then they turn around 2 days later and beat Ramapo on criteria G, which is most technical falls. New Milford had two and Pompton Lakes had one, and they win an incredible duel. Or excuse me, Ramapo had one, and they win an incredible duel over the Raiders there, a good Ramapo team who we'll touch on later on regarding the Bergen County Tournament. But, New Milford and Pompton Lakes are two really good teams there in the NJC, and Ray Cottiers for New Milford's done an incredible job since taking over that program. They hardly even had a program when he took it over a few years ago. They have a state medalist in Devin Ryan and a pretty darn good team around him again. So, they're one of the few unbeaten teams still remaining in North Jersey, and they have Hawthorne on the docket tonight. Like Bill said, this will be coming out Wednesday morning. So New Milford's wrestling Hawthorne Wednesday night. And Bill, we talked a lot last week about some South Jersey teams, but we didn't mention two of your very good ones, probably the best two ones in Camden Catholic and Delsey.
Yeah. I mean, we knew that both these teams were going to be good. It's just a matter of how good. And Delsey is, I mean, they've won three straight Group 3 titles, and this might be their best team yet. I mean, they're coming off a quad match. They went up to St. Joe's Metuchen and beat a ranked St. Joe's Metuchen team 46-20. They beat a very good Paramus Catholic team 44-23. They are just loaded top to bottom. Martin Dixon, their three-time state place winner, was down to 144 this week. Which is going to really put him into the state championship mix at that weight. You just have the kids on the bottom like Grayson Pettit and Gage Summers. Dick Dixon in the middle. Sal Marquez and Alex Grippo up top, and a lot of other kids that have taken steps up. Greg Sawyer is another one who's had a better year this year. And it's just a team without many holes and a team with hammers. They're going to be in the, this is also a team that wrestles basically everybody. They were in the Boris duels, that they wrestled in this quad meet. They have St. Augustine later in the year. This weekend, they're going to be at the Jack Welch. Probably will be seated second or third there, I would assume, and match up with St. John Vianney in the semifinals with Del Barton #1. And I think that's going to be a fantastic match. And like you said, Camden Catholic, they wrestle in some big time individual tournaments. They're in the Escape the Rock this weekend. I'm going to be interested to see how a lot of their standout kids do there. They were also at the Beast of the East and the Mustang Classic. Not as many big dual meets like as Delsey. They did beat Paramus Catholic and Pope John a little earlier. The rest of their schedule is Olympic Conference teams. They just wrestled a pretty good Brancocas Valley team that came in. I believe they were 9-2 or 9-3 and beat them by 60 points and just ran through. Jaden Simpson pinned Jake Barletta, who was undefeated. That they have a lot of kids. There's going to be a lot of kids on that team that are on the podium, I believe, in Atlantic City this fall. So there'll be a team to watch this weekend as well, more from the individual standpoint. But they've also shown what they can do as a team, and just looking down their schedule, and especially with Vianney moving up to A this year, I think they're probably going to end up this year undefeated, and it's just going to be a matter of how dominant they are through the rest of the schedule. I think the best teams left are probably like Seneca and Lenape and teams like that, and we'll have a chance to prove how dominant they can be.
Jake, you have two teams that I've gotten the chance to see so far, and I'm very impressed. What are you seeing from Caldwell and North Hunterdon so far?
Yeah, so Caldwell seems to have, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but certainly has emerged as maybe the standard bearer and the team to beat in Essex County this year. And I think that was solidified the other night when, they hosted Seton Hall Prep, who's been the team to beat there for a long time. And, they beat Seton Hall Prep 43-24. So a 19-point victory at home over a perennial powerhouse. And it's the first time they've beaten Seton Hall Prep since I think it was January 27th, 2015. So that's almost 10 years that Caldwell's gone without beating Seton Hall Prep. So now you could starting to be seeing a changing of the guard. And it's not just that win that's impressed me. They beat a very good Hanover Park team who, Ryan, I think you and I have said multiple times could easily be a favorite in Group 1. They beat Hanover Park 38-34 on a last bout pin by freshman Anthony Barrett, who's really come onto the scene this year for Coach Sean Romano. They beat Kittatinny, another good Group 1 contender. They beat Passaic Tech, who, we think is going to be a contender in North 1 Group 5. They beat Old Bridge, who's probably one of the favorites in Central Group 5. Plus, they've got a big divisional tilt with West Essex, which is always a huge rivalry match. They've got Del Val, they've got Old Pan, who's undefeated right now. So, they really bolstered their schedule this year. And I think, they saw that, when they beat GL in the section final last year, that was one thing that that the coaching staff there told me they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that, they did everything they could that if they went on a deep postseason run, they'd be able to handle it. And I think by wrestling a lot of these better teams this year, that's what they're sort of ensuring that they've been able to do. And on the North Hunterdon front, last year North Hunterdon went 7-13 in the first year under Coach Dave Bell. But, that wasn't fully indicative of all their success. They still sent 5 wrestlers to Atlantic City, which was more, I think, than any public school in Region 4 last year. So, 3 of those guys are back this year. They had, I think, what was it, Ryan? 6 guys in the finals at HWS, and they finished third in the team race behind Peaburg and Pope John. So, if there was any doubt that Dave Bell's a good coach, and, he's put all those doubters to bed and he's put that to rest. It wasn't just because he was a Bergen Catholic and getting all the good kids is why they had all the success. It's clear now in year 2 at North Hunterdon, Dave Bell's a very good coach and, one to be taken seriously. And, they're 4-2 right now. Their only losses are to Southern and to Delsea. They got big wins over Warren Hills. They beat longtime rivals Del Val 34-33 last week in, a duel that came down to some unlikely heroics from a wrestler who was getting pinned in Matthew Esposito. He was down, fought off his back, reversed Del Val's Ty Falkenstein and pinned him with 6 seconds left in the bout. So, that shows that those guys on the margins are stepping up for North Hunterdon too. And that's just as big as having the guys like Evan Kinney, like Reed Urossi, like Reed Busby, Aiden Urossi, and all those other guys. And, they've got Rumson Fairhaven coming to town. They're hosting Southern. They're hosting Pope John. They're hosting Hunterdon Central, Peaburg, Ridge. So this is a team that, come the Group 4 state playoffs, is going to know where it stands, is going to be well tested. And, this is a team that could easily, see itself in the top 20 before long and could easily, return to the glory of a few years ago when I know Chris Franca guided them to an undefeated season. They won the state title. So, I think things are quickly turning around for North Hunterdon. So,
Joe, we know how good the top of the shore is, but there's also some teams, under the radar potentially that are catching your attention as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I'm going to give a shout out to head coach Owen Brennan in Central Regional. And this is a program that 2 years ago was 2-25. Last year was 11-20. And this year they're rising from the depths. They're 11-6. Now they're not going to be a conference champion. They're not going to win a district. They're not going to, win a sectional tournament. But where they were and where they are now is just literally night and day. I mean, this is a team that is wrestling 4 sophomores, 5 freshmen, and 3 juniors. And they're only going to get better. So he's doing a great job. They're not wrestling the greatest schedule in the world, okay? They're not taking on Brick Memorial or Rumson or Southern, but they're wrestling opponents they can beat. And what I think is the most important thing for Central is they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And when you do that, your kids have better records. You get better seeds in the tournament. You don't draw the top seeds in tournaments. So I think they're really on the upswing. So kudos to Central. And then another 2 teams, both unbeaten, Point Pleasant Borough and Ocean Township. They hook up tomorrow night for the lead in their division. I think it's going to be a heck of a duel. Both teams have solid wrestlers from top to bottom. I think there's going to be a lot of lineup maneuvers in this game. Ocean coach Sippy Apicelli is not afraid to and is kind of a master at maneuvering to get the matchups that'll help him win, Ryan.
Awesome, Joe. And I mentioned injuries earlier on this podcast, and there's a lot of them all over the state. Joe, you mentioned Monera's been out, and there's certainly a lot up north, and some kids up my way still have to sit 30 days due to the transfer rules. And two kids who have to sit are Anthony Harris and Ryan Mitchell from St. Joe's. They aren't seated at Escape the Rock, and that's because they have to sit until next week since St. Joe's season began at the Beast of the East. And the NJSIAA's rule states that you must sit 30 days from the starting point of your respective season, not the start of the season, which was December 9th. So St. Joe's started at the Beast of the East 2 weeks later, almost 2 weeks later, and therefore Harris and Mitchell still have to sit at least another week. I think it's exactly another week to this day. And also on the St. Joe's front, Adrian DeJesus is still out indefinitely, and his return kind of remains a mystery. And the same goes for Jimmy Sloan. And the more this goes on, I'm less optimistic about either of them. But an injury we know is season ending for St. Joe's is Zach Belante. He had the shoulder injury, a month before the season. And we just heard last week that Xavier Williams, a two-time state medalist for Paramus Catholic, is out for the season as well. He had an injury during football season that he had season-ending surgery on, successful surgery, according to head coach John Piella. Also in North Jersey, in the public school, the non-public school ranks, Bergen Catholic was missing Nate Braun on Saturday, and he actually hasn't wrestled since the Catholic school duels. We're hoping he's able to get back on the mat soon because he pretty much missed all of last year due to his injuries. So it's been kind of far too often where Nate Braun's been not on the mat as opposed to on it. And Gino Shanina from St. Peter's Prep, he's seated at Escape the Rock, so he'll be back. He was missed at the Catholic school duels. He hasn't been healthy for most of this season, but it seems like he's coming back. Gabe Logan from Delby hasn't wrestled at all this year. I'm not optimistic about him as well, but we'll see. And on a good news front, Siege Hibbler returned for Paramus Catholic last week after sitting for 30 days. Joey Monticello's back for Don Bosco. He won his 157-pound bracket at the East Coast Catholic Classic down in Virginia. And Bosco also has Brian Little back. He wrestled against St. Joe's last week, in that conference duel. So it's good to see him healthy. He had a good freshman year. I think he's going to build on that this year. So things aren't exactly great in terms of health in North Jersey. It's getting a little better, and we're slowly getting there, but we're going to, see as these days and weeks go on. But if you saw our individual rankings, which were posted this morning, yesterday morning when, you're listening to this tomorrow, you would see a few South Jersey names in the rankings, but also out. Bill, what's the latest down there on the health front?
Yeah, I mean, Shawnee has actually been kind of keeping her head above water a little bit above 500. But they've basically done it all year without their two state place winners, Jordan Siegel at 106, and Luke Sherlock, who probably will be in the probably 132 range. We'll find out. Siegel was injured at Beast of the East. We haven't seen Sherlock all year. They should be back, both of them, before this team tournament. Potentially in the next week or two, but definitely by February. That will make Shawnee definitely a dangerous team come team tournament time. We've talked a little bit about how South Jersey Group 4 is wide open. The fact that they've kind of hung in there without those two guys has been pretty impressive. Barely lost to RV this week by 3 points. Obviously, with those two guys, I think they win. Siegel in particular, is a guy we had ranked third at the weight. Was fourth in the state last year and is definitely in the mix for a state championship if he comes back healthy. So, and then at Williamstown, they were missing some guys at the beginning of the year. They started out 1-3. We had talked about them as being a contender in Group 4 as well. Jackson Slotnick, who was a state placer for them, came back on Wednesday against Washington Township, as did Jaden Zayas, who's a upper middleweight, pretty solid wrestler, and they ended up losing to Township by 1, but then went to Ocean City this weekend and swept the quad. With Ocean City had come into that matchup undefeated. So they're definitely, in my mind, either the favorite or one of the co-favorites in South Jersey Group 4 with Toms River South, who's really kind of made an impression this year. Williamstown got healthy. Shawnee will be getting healthy, and looking for all those guys to make impacts in the team tournament and also in the individual postseason.
Jake, what's being floated around in Central Jersey? What are you hearing on the injury front?
Yeah, so the two biggest names. So the biggest name probably is Princeton's Blaze Mealy. He took sixth in the state last year at 138. He hadn't wrestled since the Sam Cali, and I texted Coach Jess Monzo on Monday, and I said, "Oh, when are you expecting him back?" He's like, "We're not trying to win a couple of dual meets here and there. We're trying to win a state title." So Blaze Mealy is seated at Escape the Rock, so Bill is going to get a chance to see him over the weekend. They were just trying to rest him, make sure he's as recovered as possible. So, that's a big boost to that lineup, and a kid who could very easily find himself down on the podium again in Atlantic City. And then two guys out of Union County. One is Luke Schultz at Cranford, who was a medalist for them at Beast of the East. He had an ankle injury that sidelined him from Beast of the East until now. Coach Pat Gorman told me he's wrestling tomorrow or tonight whenever you're listening to this. So he'll be back in the lineup for the Cougars. And then Governor Livingston got a big boost with state qualifier Jake Kreisberg coming back. So that really helps solidify their upper weights as they look to push Cranford for a Union County title this year. So, those three guys definitely headlined by Mealy coming back. That's a big boost. And it'll be interesting to see who he draws at Escape the Rock, just how healthy he is and kind of what level he's at. If he can take that next step from going in from sixth in the state to, a higher place this year. So.
Joe, what are you hearing out of the shore? You mentioned Manera's hurt. That's not the only injury supposedly that Southern's dealing with right now. And also CBA is slowly getting, back to health. Brock Azirowitz is back, and, they have a couple other kids that are, they're hoping to get back soon as well.
Yeah, Brock Azirowitz is back. His dad is the football coach at Tonsor North, and, it just told us that, he's just a little bit beat up. But he should be fine for this week, and they'll need him. And the other good news for CBA is that their heavyweight, Howland, who's had knee issues last year and this year, he will be back. He transferred from Hamilton East last year, and he's going to be back in the lineup. I mean, he's not going to beat Rocco Delegata on Wednesday night, but he's going to help him in a lot of instances.
Now, we've highlighted, a few wrestlers on this episode, and we highlighted a bunch in our Wrestlers of the Week article. If you haven't seen it already, that's a weekly post for us every Monday morning. And a wrestler that I touched on in the last episode, but I wanted to kind of expand more on, was the 215-pounder out of Mount Olive, Nico Gonzalez. He's a junior. I mentioned him as one of the 5 returning state qualifiers for them, but he's kind of becoming more than that. For the Marauders there. And he had an outstanding week last week. He beat Elbrus Majaja from Del Barton in the duel that they wrestled last week. And it was a 63-9 final score. But that was one of the 2 bouts that Mount Olive won. It was a 5-3 decision, and one of the most competitive bouts in that match, for the Marauders in the Green Wave. And Nico won a few more times last week, and he's now 15-0 on the year and in our individual rankings now, with the number 7 spot at 215. And, to me, he's kind of just shown enough at this point, whether it's, whether it happens later this year or next year, to become one of the top pound for pound guys in the region. He's even shown the ability to wrestle up at heavyweight. He's long, he's athletic. It gives him an advantage against the heavier guys. And he's also very strong. He's a very strong kid. I've seen him take kids to his back, just pulling on their arms and just easy takedowns that just kind of show off his athletic ability and his strength, that combination there. So if there was a top 50 pound for pound ranking in North Jersey, I think he would be in it. And I think his teammate Anthony Piemonte would be in it as well. So Mount Olive's good from 106 to 285, but there are 2 top-end wrestlers there in Gonzalez and Piemonte. Both have what it takes to make the podium in one of these next 2 years for sure, because they're both juniors. But Jake, something very interesting happened last week in Central Jersey. Tell everyone who took their chance at Harvey Luddington up a weight last week.
Yeah, so you're talking about kind of top flight wrestlers. This could have been, easily in terms of star power, caliber of wrestlers, could be one of the best bouts we'll see all year. So Cranford, 175-pounder Jordan Chapman bumped up to 190 against Brick Memorial and took on Harvey Luddington. Now, Luddington won by 16-6 major decision, but Chapman was able to take Ludington down a few times before Ludington was able to kind of open up and get to his offense. But, the thing that Cranford coach Pat Gorman told me is this was kind of the game plan all along. If the duel was in hand one way or another, whether Cranford was going to win the duel or lose the duel, he was going to bump Chapman up. And, Chapman weighed in at, I think Gorman told me 177. Ludington weighed in at like 188, 189-ish, give or take. So, the problem is that both of these guys are so good, they get forfeited to so often. Or, teams will send out a kid who Chapman or Ludington will pin in 30 seconds or a minute, and not much is gained from that. Gorman sort of was chuckling when he told me, he's like, if you watch the film, you'll see both kids definitely need to get in better shape because they haven't wrestled super tough competition of late. Obviously Cranford goes to the Beast of the East, and Harvey wrestles some of the state's best as well. But outside of that, in the day to day, whether it's in the practice room or their county conference, division dual meet slate, they're not seeing that caliber of kid. And so, the other thing that this goes to show is, we need to see more of this. This doesn't impact either one's seeding come postseason time, come districts time, because they're going to be at different weights. So, what's the harm? What's to lose? And the answer is nothing. If Chapman were to have won, great. He would have scored maybe one of the biggest upsets in the state all season, if not of the last few years, by beating Ludington. But, by Ludington winning, that's going to better prepare Chapman for what he needs to work on. Ryan Burton's not going to be an easy test at 175, certainly. But, by getting those reps in, that's going to help Chapman. That's going to help Ludington. So, I know everybody in the media sphere was, praising both Mike Kiley and Pat Gorman for making this happen. And, I think those praises are well warranted. This is something that we should see more of, not less of. And in an era where we're seeing a lot of forfeits and things like that, this goes to show, it puts butts in seats, it gets eyes on the sport, it gets eyes on some of these best kids. And, like Pat Gorman told me, Jordan Chapman's going to Rutgers. Every Big Ten duel at Rutgers, the Jordan Chapman's going to wrestle. He's going to be seeing somebody good. So, not even just preparing him for this year, but preparing him for when he's in Scott Goodell's lineup at some point too. So, I think kudos all around to everybody at Brick Memorial and Cranford for, making that happen and, taking that risk because, I think it'll hopefully inspire some other coaches to do the same.
Yeah, definitely, Jake. I think, you mentioned both Burton and Ludington, and obviously Chapman wrestled Alessio Parrington last year. So he's got a decision to make. Like, who does he want to take his chance at? He wanted to kind of see how close he was to Ludington, and we'll see what comes of the the next few weeks, what he decides to do. But Joe, who's caught your attention so far on the shore? Who's kind of poking their head out and making statements in terms of individuals that are kind of just making their mark so far?
Well, just to tack on to what Jake had said about it, wrestling needs these kind of matchups. And we talked about Ryan at the Catholic school duels where these, tremendous teams, the best New Jersey has, were willing to take a loss in December to see some quality competition. And, from a fan standpoint, there's nothing worse than showing up expecting to see two top wrestlers connect when one coach throws the guy a fist. I think that's not good for wrestling. Like Jake said, we need to put butts in seats. The kid I want to talk about a little bit is Jake Clayton from Point Pleasant Borough, and I mentioned earlier his team is going to be at Ocean on Wednesday in a big divisional match. But this kid is a phenomenal athlete. During the football season, we talked about him. He's the quarterback in an option offense. He's a shortstop on the baseball team. This kid is not just a wrestler. When you watch him on the mat, he's an athlete. He's undefeated. He's going to be one of the kids to watch at the Shore Conference Tournament in 2 weeks. And I think down here at the Shore, where we have Knox and Ludington and the Kennys and Coluccio and some other state place winners, maybe he flies a little bit below the radar, but he was on the podium in Atlantic City last year. I think he's going to be on the podium again this March, and I think he's going to be up a couple of runs. So far he's a kid who's really caught my eye, not only doing what he's doing, but how he's doing it, Ryan.
Bill, who's making the statements down in the South so far?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Williamstown, the kids they got back, and one kid they've had from the beginning of the year is a freshman named Tristan Rosemeyer, who's really impressed at 106. First match of the year, drew Luke Johnston from Hal, who we have I think ranked number 4 in our rankings. He got pinned there. Went 2-2 with the Beast, but his only other loss this year is to Travis Bauer from Seneca, who's like basically right in our mind, right on the cusp of being in our state rankings, and that was a 1-0 loss. He's had some very impressive wins. He's picked up some big bonus points for Williamstown down low, where they also have Tyler Hildebrandt and Adam Frolich. Frolich is probably also a 6-pounder, but they've had to bump some up, and Hildebrandt's like a 13-pounder who's basically wrestled 20 a lot this year, because they're 3 best kids down there, and we'll see how that all shakes out in the postseason. Obviously, they'll have to move around some weights, and maybe Frolich has to go up a couple weight classes. But also, another 6-pounder, a senior from Kingsway, Jason Miola, who missed a little bit of time, a couple weeks, but since he came back, has been really impressive. He's a former state qualifier at 106, and you don't see too many seniors at 106. But he's a guy that could definitely make a run this year if he can hold that weight and stay healthy, stay in the lineup. Kingsway is a team we haven't really talked about much. This is they maybe don't have some of the hammers they've had in the past, or even the depth, but they've really kind of hung in there. They went out, and the other team, much like Delsey, will wrestle anybody. Went up to North Jersey and beat Passaic Tech and Pascack Valley, and lost to Mount Olive, and they're also in the Jack Welch this weekend. I see them behind, obviously Del Barton and St. John Vianney and Delsey, but if they can maybe take fourth at that tournament, it'd be another big step for that team. And again, Miola's a big part of that with him, and I'd say Tommy DiPietro in the middle. Probably they're 2 kids with the most criteria and the most experience, and probably their 2 best wrestlers, and we'll need to carry them going forward.
All right, now let's wrap this up, guys, with other things we're looking forward to, the rest of this week. In my neck of the woods, we have the Bergen County Tournament on Saturday and Sunday at Garfield Middle School for the second year in a row. I think it's a pretty good venue, and I know a lot of the coaches and parents kind of feel the same way. And St. Joe's won't have their races there because it's a direct conflict with Escape the Rock. And even with how good the competition is at the county tourney, those matches at Council Rock South mean a lot more to St. Joe's. So you'll still see Bergen Catholic there, and Don Bosco and Paramus Catholic, and a public school that had a really good tournament last year was Ramapo, and they have a lot of pieces back from last year. I think you're also going to see a good tournament from Ultapan, Pascack Valley, Westwood, Hasbrook Heights, and a couple other teams that are looking to make some noise on the county level. And I went back to last year's results, and there's only one returning champ from last year, and that's Joey Monticello from Don Bosco. A lot of kids who graduated. Obviously, Xavier Williams, like I said, is out for the year. Rocco Delegata is no longer at St. Joe's, and neither is Donnie Almeida. So there's a couple faces that are no longer there, and that's going to open the door for a lot more kids. And, there's a lot of championship caliber wrestlers in this field who didn't really have the chance to win the past couple years with, how good St. Joe's best contingent's been, or Bergen or Bosco. And a kid that I'm looking at is Devin Ryan. I think he's going to break through this year. He's a state medalist. I think he's due to kind of be like an MOW type of kid at the county tournament. And he's one kid I'm keeping an eye on. So Jake, you're going to be with me on Saturday. You're not joining me on you're going to be with me on Sunday, excuse me. You're not joining me on Saturday there, but what are you kind of keeping an eye on in Garfield this week?
Yeah, last year, to Ryan's point about there only being one finalist back, it seemed like every final was a Joe's, Bergen, Bosco, whomever, dual meet. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously those kids are great, but, it's the state's most populous county. Big North NJIC have some of the most teams of any conference in any sport. So, to see some more representation, that's really what I'm hoping for, that, we might see an Ultapan Emerson final, or we might see, a Westwood PV final. I think with the absence of Joe's, with Paramus Catholic, being down in a lot of spots outside of maybe Nick Polito and C. Chibler and a few others, and, with Bergen sending most of its guys, maybe not all of them, hopefully that'll pave the way for some public schools to break through and have some champs. Last year, there were, I think it was what, two public school champs. Omar Tunkara, who transferred out of Teaneck, but he was a champ for Teaneck last year. And then Mawa had a champ because Don Bosco's Ben Garcia lost by injury default or injury defaulted out of the tournament. So, I think that you're gonna see hopefully some more competitive bouts in the finals and a few different faces, which I think makes things more exciting. I think it keeps people interested who wouldn't normally be otherwise. So, that's really what I'm keeping an eye on. And then the reason I'm not joining you Saturday is because I'll be at the Union County Tournament where Cranford's won the last, I think it's six in a row, but they were threatened last year. Governor Livingston lost by, sorry, it was Cranford's ninth Union County Tournament title in a row last year. But GL was hot on their heels. I mean, Cranford won the tournament with 223 and a half points. GL had 217. Now, one of GL's better wrestlers last year, Henrique Ribeiro, had to injury default out of his 126-pound final. If he wrestles and if he wins that picture looks a lot different. And they started the finals at 157, or I'm sorry, at 175 last year, which meant things ended with Jordan Chapman for Cranford. And Cranford's title hopes all came down to him. And, obviously he delivered. He pinned GL's Christian Joya in 43 seconds in that final. So, with Joya back this year for GL, Nate Faxon at 215, who was a county champ for them, Zach Belverio, who we have in our rankings from Johnson, he's back, as is Mike Daly. So there are a lot of returning champs back in the field at Union High School this weekend. And I think that that'll make things exciting. The addition of Kreisberg back to GL definitely bolsters their lineup. And, Cranford's a team, in a lot of their dual meets, they're getting beat at 20. They're getting beat sometimes at 32, sometimes down low at 90 at 215. So, it doesn't have to be GL, but if any of these other schools, whether it's a Westfield, whether it's, Rahway, whomever it might be, can pick off some bouts at some of those weights where Cranford struggle in duels, that could bode well for some of those other teams and knocking Cranford off its perch. But, like we saw with Somerset too, though, if a kid loses early, but then can, wrestle his way back for third or fifth, whatever it might be, that's going to be just as crucial too. So I'll be really curious to see, how that race shakes out. So, I think between Union and Bergen, I think this is a good weekend definitely for, county tournaments, at least on the individual front.
Bill, give us a little look at Escape the Rock and also Jack Welch duels. What are you looking at there?
Yeah, Jack Welch, again, one of the bigger dual meet tournaments in the entire state. They have 16 teams. Probably get the seedings for that later tonight. Again, Del Barton and St. John Vianney and Delsey at the top. As we mentioned, St. John Vianney Delsey semifinal should be outstanding. This is a tournament that Del Barton's come to for, I'd say, most of the last 10 years. One that Coach Brian Stoll has always loved, in part because, he often had times finding teams to wrestle him. Obviously they're in the Catholic duels now, so that gives them a few matches. But, there was always that 10 dual meet requirement to get into the state tournament. And they would just get the 10 sometimes with the Jack Welch. He was happy to come down here and get 5 matches and hope it didn't snow because there were the tournament accepted them and he was able to get 5 matchups. And obviously it's top heavy with those teams, but again, some teams like the Kingsway or a Warren Hills, Cinnamons and Delran, some other solid South Jersey teams and from and teams from around the state that will come here and get some really good matchups. And it is always a highlight. That's a 2-day tournament down at Morristown where every team is going to get 5 matches. And then Escape the Rock, which this is kind of right up there with Beast of the East as the best tournament in the in season. A lot of nationally ranked kids. I think there's 50 nationally ranked kids in this tournament. St. Joseph Montvale, St. Peter's, Christian Brothers, Southern are among the teams that are in there. Ryan Burton's is a former champ. Will be going for another title. Caden Ricciardi's a former champ that will be going for another title. Look, this is the tournament where Anthony Knox lost his only high school match as a freshman. This is the tournament where Jimmy Mullen, who was a three-time state champ, could have been a four-timer if he had wrestled in the state tournament his sophomore year, lost in the finals twice. That gives you an idea of the caliber of competition. Paul Kenny lost in the finals here last year. He's going to be obviously a top seed. I'm looking at, and also, by the way, Pennsylvania weight. So, you might not recognize some of the weight classes. Some kids are going to have to bump up a little bit. Some kids are going to have to, drop a couple pounds to fit into some of these weight classes. But I'm kind of looking like 133, for example. Sammy Spalding, who was third a year ago, is in this tournament. But also some other guys like Bobby Duffy from CBA, Vincent Paino from St. Joe's Montvale, Gino Shanina from St. Peter's, Cole Rose from Princeton, Santino Denisi from Hanover Park, Christian Hoops from Washington Township. Those are that could be your state podium, right? At 132 pounds. You're going to see, we've seen sometimes state finals previews in the wrestlebacks at this tournament. So it's an excellent tournament. Usually it's on a different weekend than Jack Welch. So sometimes we'll get teams that are in both. This year, unfortunately, they're on the same weekend. But we'll Escape the Rocks a Saturday Sunday deal, so we'll be able to catch the Jack Welch finals on Saturday while they wrestle through to the quarters at Escape the Rock, and then we'll go up there on Sunday and catch the semis and the finals, and it should be a couple great tournaments. With a lot of teams from all around the state competing.
Yeah, Bill, you mentioned Bobby Duffy. That's another name I forgot about who's back for CBA. He returned last week. And Joe, here, take us home. We got a couple more good short conference duels just like last week that are happening this week.
I talked already, Ryan, about, the Brick Memorial Rumson match should be interesting. Ocean and Point Pleasant Borough, but, the big daddy of them all here in the Shore this week is the St. John Vianney at CBA match. Now, these two teams, these two schools are not friendly rivals. So, there's going to be a lot of intensity in that one. This is a rematch already, Ryan. They met up in the Catholic school duels where St. John Vianney kind of shellacked CBA 49-25. In that match, St. John Vianney won 9 bouts. It's really hard to imagine too many teams winning 9 bouts against CBA, but St. John Vianney did it, and they collected bonus points in 6 of those 9 wins. Now, this will be the second meeting. There's a good chance they'll meet in the non-public A championships too. So CBA's got to find some wins. They got to stay off their back some places. The one advantage St. John Vianney has against everybody is that they're ahead 12-0 because of Anthony Knox and Rocco Delegata, the 2 multi-time state champions. But, so I guess CBA will be a tune-up for St. John Vianney going down to the Welch duels. But I expect a packed house for this one, Ryan.
Well, that'll do it for episode number 2. You guys know where to find us on social media. We want to thank our producer, Brian Dekine, who runs the show for us and makes this possible each and every week. And you can find our written content at highschoolsports.nj.com/wrestling. Take care, everyone. We'll be back here with more roundtable discussion next week for episode number 3 of Weighing In.